Extraordinary developments continue to emerge from the Israel-Palestine war. With Syria's involvement in the conflict, the danger of a third world war is looming over the entire world. We are sharing the latest breaking news with you. Intense hours were experienced for the conflict. Extraordinary clashes occurred around midnight, according to Syrian or Israeli time. Israel launched an extraordinary offensive, completely destroying Syria's international airports. The attacks carried out by Israel were a complete success. The assaults that began at midnight continued until the early hours of the morning. Even as we are reporting this news to you, they are ongoing. Following the outbreak of the war in Gaza, many countries had joined the conflict. From Hezbollah forces in Iran to Lebanon, many countries had launched attacks on Israel. Israeli President Benjamin Netanyahu responded very harshly to this. Netanyahu announced that all countries declaring war on Israel would regret it and that Israel would win this war. Following this development, the whole world became embroiled in the conflict. The United States condemned the attacks on Israel, declaring its support for Israel and sending numerous aircraft carriers and fighter jets to the region. As the war continued to escalate, an incredible height of tension was reached. The European Union was initially at a loss as to what to do. While everyone was watching what they would do, Syria suddenly attacked Israel. Syria found support as it launched attacks on Tel Aviv. With the combination of forces from Lebanon and Hezbollah in Iran, Israel suddenly found itself in a difficult situation. As of today, the night of October 15th has seen many significant developments that have left us astonished. The decision taken by Netanyahu initiated the Great Offensive, and the Israeli army turned the battlefield into a hellish scene. The Palestinian forces, who had to flee all day in the face of Israel's offensive, were shocked by the events of the night. The Israeli army, giving an excellent response to Syria, ended the night with a great victory. We are conveying the events minute by minute to you. The Israeli army was initially planning for the Great Offensive. In fact, an announcement had been made by the Israeli General Staff yesterday morning, declaring to the whole world that the army was preparing for a massive assault. While no one knew when it would happen, the Israeli army was planning a major operation. However, the incident was not to happen that day. The Israeli army was not in the habit of fighting without a plan. Benjamin Netanyahu, who knew all the dynamics of the Middle East very well, made preparations for the Iron Dome. He significantly increased the number of missiles. Intelligence had been received that the forces of Syria and Hamas would launch attacks on Israel. The diplomatic traffic that had been going on since yesterday morning came to an end in the evening hours. The first attack was carried out at exactly 2 o'clock in the afternoon, according to the U.S. time. Hamas forces started firing rockets at Tel Aviv. Israel's world-renowned air defense system, Iron Dome, immediately took action. While it couldn't completely fend off the attacks by the Hamas forces, it managed to defend Israel adequately. Following this attack in the night hours, an unexpected second attack came into play. Ascalon city was subjected to a massive assault. The Israeli General Staff immediately took action. The Israeli army, operating the Iron Dome with extraordinary force, responded to the Hamas forces with a significant blow. The Iron Dome missile systems of Israel, which continued its attack for an uninterrupted hour, managed to take control of the region. When the clock struck midnight, the actual attack took place. The Israeli army was considering not waiting, but the feared scenario happened in Tel Aviv. A missile that the Iron Dome missed hit Tel Aviv. Although there were no casualties, some were injured. Infuriated by the situation and making a sudden decision, the Israeli army initiated the mentioned major offensive. In fact, they were supposed to be on standby that night, and we explained to you why they started the attack. It was almost like a book. As midnight approached, Ascalon experienced a second shock. Syria meddled in the war. Syrian leader Assad initiated bombardment on Israel's Ascalon city. The Iron Dome had a significant duty once again, because Israel was not prepared for this attack from Syria. An attack from Syria was not expected at that moment. The Israeli army responded well to this as well. The rockets from Syria were almost entirely intercepted. After the Israeli army passed this test, they immediately launched a counterattack. Throughout the night, the Israeli forces bombarded Hamas forces and Syria, managing to render more than 1,000 terrorist group members ineffective. Various weapons were used between the parties throughout the night. Israel's defense system, the Iron Dome, effectively countered rocket and missile attacks, preventing casualties in Tel Aviv and other cities. In Israeli airstrikes, warplanes and drones were actively utilized. Additionally, tanks and armored vehicles were involved in ground operations. Syria conducted rocket and artillery fire towards the southern Israeli city of Ashkelon. Ballistic missiles and artillery batteries were used in Syria's attacks, heightening tensions in the region. On the Palestinian side, Hamas militants launched attacks on Israel using low-tech weapons such as rocket launchers and homemade explosives. The use of these weapons in the conflict escalated the tension and concern in the region. Israeli forces, extending to the Syrian border, initiated an operation in the city of Deraa in Syria. Israeli President Benjamin Netanyahu, seeking revenge from Syria, left the city in ruins with a rain of bombardment. Many places, including the Syrian capital Damascus and Aleppo, were reduced to rubble after the prolonged attack throughout the night. The international airport in Aleppo, Syria's international airport, is now inoperable. We can say that Assad, who launched attacks on Israel from this airport, is currently in a desperate situation. The tension in the region had deep roots as a result of long-standing historical conflicts and disputes. Prolonged disputes and territorial disagreements had heightened animosity and violence among the people in the region. Repeated conflicts in history had weakened hopes for peace in the region and undermined trust between the parties. Despite long-standing peace efforts and international mediation initiatives, it was evident that the conflicts in the region had not been resolved. Deep divisions between the parties, territorial claims, and political interests had become a long-standing cycle. While the recent conflict further heightened tensions in the region, the increasing calls for a solution from the international community and peace-loving groups were notable. However, deep-seated anger and hostility between the parties continued to hamper peace efforts. To end the conflicts and establish lasting peace in the region, it was essential for the parties to engage in mutual dialogue and negotiations. A fair and comprehensive peace plan that took into account territorial claims and security concerns could help ensure stability and prosperity in the region. The international community needed to make more efforts to find solutions to humanitarian crises and suffering in the region. Ensuring the safety of civilian populations, delivering humanitarian aid, and establishing peace required the effective involvement of the international community. However, ending this conflict, which has deep historical roots, and establishing lasting peace would require long-term and determined efforts. Rebuilding trust between the parties and establishing stability in the region would depend on the determination and conciliatory approach of all parties involved.